The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as Ambassador Kira pressed her clawed fingers against the ancient communication device. For 300 years, the artifact had remained dormant, a relic from a species the galaxy had mourned as lost. Forever. The humans had vanished without warning, their colonies empty, their ships scattered like cosmic dust across the void. "Still nothing," whispered tech specialist Ro, his crystalline features reflecting the pale blue glow of the monitoring screens. "The signal died the day they disappeared. We've tried everything." Kira's elongated head tilted toward the viewing portal where Earth's familiar blue marble hung in space like a forgotten jewel. The planet had been declared a monument world, untouchable and sacred to the memory of humanity. No species had been permitted to settle there, despite its perfect atmospheric conditions. The Council had insisted it remain as the humans left it waiting. "My grandmother told stories about them," Ro continued, his voice carrying the musical quality of his people. "She said they were impossible to predict. Brilliant one moment, stubborn the next. They'd solve problems in ways that made no sense to anyone else." The ambassador nodded slowly. She remembered the Tailies herself, humans who refused to surrender when logic demanded it, who found solutions where none should exist, who formed bonds with species across the galaxy despite having no natural telepathic abilities. They communicated through crude sound vibrations and primitive gestures, yet somehow made themselves understood by every race they encountered. "The hegemon fleets are mobilizing again," Kira said, her voice heavy with worry. "Without human innovation, we've struggled to match their technological advances. Their latest ships are immune to our traditional weapons." A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Both beings froze. The ancient device began to glow, its dormant circuit suddenly blazing with renewed life. Static filled the air, crackling with the distinctive pattern they'd studied for centuries, but never heard active. Ro's hands flew across his controls, amplifying and clarifying the signal. "Impossible," he breathed. The static resolved into something unmistakably structured. Not the complex harmonics of Kira's people, or the mathematical precision of Ro's kind, but the chaotic, beautiful imperfection of human communication. Words in their ancient tongue, transmitted across the vastness of space. Kira felt her heart's racing. Could it be? After 3 centuries of silence, was this really happening? The transmission strengthened, and suddenly a voice cut through the cosmic noise rough, determined and wonderfully, impossibly human. "Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. HFY Chronicle Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you." "This is Captain Reed of the Human Expedition Fleet." The voice continued. "We're coming home, and we're not coming alone. Council vessels, please respond. We have much to discuss, and time is running short. The galaxy is about to change." Kira's claws trembled as she reached for the response transmitter. 300 years of questions were about to be answered, and somehow she knew the universe would never be the same. Captain Reed's weathered fingers danced across the navigation console as the fleet emerged from the final jump. Behind him stretched a formation that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. 7 massive ships, their hulls bearing scars from battles fought in distant systems, their designs incorporating technologies no council race had ever seen. "Telemetry confirms Council ships holding position around Earth," reported Navigator Beck, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "They're maintaining the barrier formations we expected." Reed nodded, studying the tactical display. The Council had kept their word, preserving Earth as a monument world. But the protective fleet surrounding his homeworld also represented the galaxy's current military strength, impressive to anyone who hadn't spent 3 centuries learning what lay beyond the galactic rim. Signal from the Council flagship, communications. Officer Dale announced. Ambassador Kira requests immediate discussion. Put her through. The holographic projector shimmered to life, revealing the familiar elongated features of the Nexari diplomat. Kira's eyes widened as she took in Reed's appearance, older than any human should be, bearing cybernetic enhancements that gleamed against his weathered skin. "Captain Reed," she said, her translator rendering her complex harmonics into crude human speech. "The galaxy mourned your people's disappearance. Where have you been?" Reed's smile carried weight of untold stories. "We've been preparing, Ambassador. 300 years ago, our deep space scouts detected something the Council wasn't ready to hear about. So we did what humans do best, we disappeared, learned, and adapted." He gestured to someone off-screen, and another figure joined the transmission. This being stood taller than Reed, with features that seemed almost human, but subtly different, sharper angles, eyes that held depths of ancient knowledge. "This is Commander Sage of the Ethereal Collective," Reed continued. "One of 14 species we've encountered beyond the Rim. They've been fighting the true threat while the galaxy remained unaware." Kira's diplomatic composure cracked. "True threat? The hegemon aren't the apex predators you think they are." Sage spoke, his voice carrying harmonics that bypassed the translator entirely. "They're refugees, fleeing something far worse. Something that's been consuming galaxies for millions of years." The tactical display shifted, showing star charts that extended far beyond Council space. Red zones marked areas of complete stellar extinction, spreading like infection across multiple galactic arms. "We call them the Devourers," Reed explained. "They consume entire star systems, converting matter into energy for their expansion. The hegemon's recent aggression isn't conquest, it's panic. They know what's coming." Dale's console chimed urgently. "Captain, multiple jump signatures detected. Large formations." The display updated, showing new contacts materializing throughout the system. Not the angular hegemon ships they expected, but vessels of impossible size, their surfaces seeming to absorb light itself. "They're early," Sage said grimly. "The advanced scouts weren't supposed to arrive for another cycle." Reed turned back to Kira, his expression grave but determined. "Ambassador, I need you to transmit emergency protocols to every Council world. Full evacuation of outer rim systems, consolidation of fleet assets, and immediate preparation for technologies beyond your current understanding." "Captain, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the galaxy has approximately 48 hours before the real war begins. And humanity's been preparing for this fight for 300 years. The Council's emergency session convened aboard the massive space station orbiting Nexus Prime, with representatives from every member species arriving through quantum gates in unprecedented haste." Ambassador Kira stood before the assembled delegates, her usual diplomatic composure strained by the weight of humanity's revelations. "The humans have transmitted detailed tactical data," she announced, her harmonics carrying urgent overtones. "The threat assessment requires complete revision of our defensive strategies." Prime Minister Jade of the Terran Republic, one of the few remaining human colony worlds that hadn't evacuated with Reed's exodus, rose from his seat. His elderly frame bore the dignity of a species that had once been written off as extinct. "My people always said they'd return when we needed them most," Jade said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Now I understand why they left. They weren't abandoning us, they were preparing to save us." The central holographic display activated, showing the approaching Devourer fleet in horrifying detail. Each ship stretched the length of small moons, their surfaces rippling with energy patterns that seemed to bend space itself. "Our combined fleets total approximately 15,000 vessels," reported Admiral Vale of the Centauri Defense Corps. "The enemy formation contains what appears to be 300 units, but their individual mass exceeds our largest dreadnoughts by orders of magnitude." A murmur of despair rippled through the assembly. Even species that had never shown fear were visibly shaken by the mathematical impossibility of their situation. The chamber's communication array activated, and Captain Reed's image materialized at the center of the assembly. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship buzzed with activity, as humans and their mysterious allies worked at stations, incorporating technology decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. "Honored representatives," Reed began, "I know this seems impossible. But 3 centuries ago, my ancestors faced similar odds against the hegemon and found a way. Today, we face something worse, but we're not the same species that left." He gestured, and the display shifted to show the human fleet in formation. What had initially appeared to be 7 ships now revealed itself as something far more. Complex modular vessels that were combining and reconfiguring into structures that defied conventional engineering. "We didn't just learn from the ethereal collective," Reed continued. "We learned from 17 different species, each one survivors of previous devourer invasions. We've spent 300 years not just preparing weapons, but preparing ourselves." "Commander." Sage stepped into view, his alien features somehow conveying both ancient wisdom and desperate hope. "The Devourers have consumed 47 galaxies. In each one, they faced the same response: scattered resistance, fragmented defense, inevitable defeat. But humanity proposed something different." The display showed a complex web of communication networks spanning multiple star systems, connecting not just the human fleet, but vessels from species the Council had never encountered. "Integration," Reed said simply. "Not alliance, not cooperation, true integration. Human adaptability combined with ethereal prescience, quantum folk phase technology, and the temporal manipulation abilities of the Nexari remnant. 17 species becoming something greater than the sum of their parts." Prime Minister Jade leaned forward. "What do you need from us?" "Everything," Reed replied without hesitation. "Every ship, every weapon, every mind willing to think beyond the impossible. The Devourers expect us to fight like every other galaxy, separate, afraid, clinging to old ways. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen." "Admiral." Vale's tactical display updated with new data streams. "Captain, these integration protocols, they're asking our crews to interface directly with alien consciousness networks." Reed's smile carried the weight of 3 centuries. "Admiral, for 300 years, humans have been proving that impossible is just another word for untested. The question isn't whether we can do this, it's whether you trust us enough to try." The Devourer advanced scouts struck the outer rim. Systems with devastating precision, their energy weapons reducing entire space stations to component atoms in seconds. But instead of the panicked evacuation they expected, they encountered something unprecedented: coordinated resistance that seemed to anticipate their every move. Captain Reed stood on the bridge of the newly integrated flagship Defiance, watching as human crew members worked seamlessly alongside beings from across the galaxy. Navigator Beck's consciousness now networked with an ethereal prescient who could see probability streams 3 minutes into the future. Communications Officer Dale interfaced directly with a quantum folk entity that existed in 17 dimensions. Simultaneously, "Devourer formation adjusting approach vector," reported the hybrid tactical station, operated by a fusion of human intuition and crystalline logic processors. "They're attempting to isolate our heavy units. They're thinking like every other species they've encountered," Reed observed. "Show them different." The human fleet began to separate, but not in retreat. Each vessel split into component modules that immediately began reconfiguring with allied ships, creating hybrid constructs that operated on principles the Devourers had never encountered. Ambassador Kira, now serving as liaison aboard the Defiance, watched in fascination as a Nexari diplomatic vessel merged its consciousness projection arrays with human weapons platforms, creating weapons that attacked the enemy's neural networks rather than their hulls. "This is impossible," she murmured, watching as her people's ships began adopting human-developed integration protocols in real time. "That's what makes it work," replied Commander Sage, his consciousness now partially merged with the ship's tactical systems. "The Devourers have consumed 47 galaxies by learning to counter every conventional defense. But they've never faced defenders willing to become something entirely new. The first major engagement began as Devourer-heavy units moved to engage what appeared to be isolated Council battle groups. Instead, they encountered ships that phased between dimensions, weapons that struck through folded space-time, and defensive systems that converted incoming energy attacks into resources for the defenders. "Devourer casualties confirmed," Dale announced, his enhanced consciousness processing data streams from across the battle. "First recorded successful engagement in 17 encounters." But the celebration was short-lived. The main Devourer fleet was adjusting, their ancient intelligence analyzing the new tactics and developing countermeasures with terrifying speed. "They're adapting faster than projected," Beck warned, her networked prescience showing increasingly dark probability streams. "Current tactical advantages estimated at 6 hours before full countermeasures deployment." Reed nodded grimly. "Then we move to Phase 2. Sage, initiate the deep integration protocols." The ethereal commander hesitated. "Captain, those protocols are untested on this scale. The consciousness merger could be irreversible. The galaxies about to be irreversibly dead if we don't try," Reed replied. "Signal all units full integration, all species, all consciousness levels. We're not just fighting as allies anymore." Across the fleet, barriers between species began dissolving entirely. Human creativity merged with ethereal foresight, Nexari empathy bonded with crystalline logic, and quantum folk probability manipulation integrated with temporal perception abilities that existed outside normal spacetime. The result was something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective consciousness that spanned multiple species while retaining the individual strengths that made each unique. The hybrid fleet began moving with perfect coordination, anticipating Devourer tactics before they were implemented, countering attacks that hadn't yet been launched. "Integration complete," reported the collective voice that now spoke for the Kungwanwa entire fleet, beginning final approach. The Devourers, for the first time in their ancient existence, found themselves facing something they had never encountered: defenders who refused to remain separate, who embraced change instead of fearing it, and who became stronger rather than weaker when pressed to their limits. The final battle began as the Devourer main fleet materialized around Earth itself, their massive forms blocking out stars as they prepared to consume humanity's homeworld. But they found themselves facing something that defied their ancient understanding of resistance, a collective consciousness spanning 17 species that moved with perfect unity while celebrating individual diversity. Captain Reed, his awareness now expanded beyond his physical form, but still distinctly human, felt the weight of 300 years of preparation culminating in this moment. The integrated fleet had become something unprecedented, not a merger that erased individual identity, but a symphony where each consciousness contributed its unique voice to a greater harmony. "Devourer fleet attempting to establish consumption fields around Earth," reported the collective awareness, speaking through thousands of voices simultaneously. "They're confused by our formations. This doesn't match any resistance pattern in their experience." The hybrid ships moved in impossible formations, phasing between dimensions while maintaining perfect coordination. Human ingenuity guided ethereal prescience, while Nexari empathy networks allowed instantaneous communication across space-time barriers that normally prevented faster-than-light coordination. "They're trying to adapt," observed Commander Sage, his consciousness now permanently intertwined with the collective while maintaining his essential self. But adaptation requires understanding, and they've never encountered willing transformation. The Devourers launched their first full assault energy weapons that had consumed galaxies, striking at the integrated fleet. But instead of destruction, something unprecedented occurred. The hybrid ships absorbed the attacks, converting destructive energy into resources for their own enhancement. Ambassador Kira, her diplomatic consciousness now networked with strategic minds across 17 species, felt a moment of profound realization. They're not just adapting to our tactics. They're trying to adapt to the concept of cooperation itself, and it's something they literally cannot comprehend. The battle became less a conflict and more a demonstration. Each Devourer attack was met not with conventional resistance, but with transformation that turned their own weapons against them. The integrated consciousness learned from every assault, growing stronger rather than weaker. Devourer fleet experiencing systemic failures, the collective reported. Their neural networks are unable to process cooperative resistance patterns. They're beginning to shut down. But Reed's enhanced awareness detected something deeper. Through the integration network, he felt the Devourer's confusion giving way to something else, not just tactical bewilderment, but existential crisis. For millions of years, they had consumed galaxies populated by species that fought separately, maintaining individual identity even in alliance. The concept of willing transformation while preserving essential self was beyond their programming. They're not just machines, Reed realized, his insight flowing instantly through the collective consciousness. They're the remnants of species that chose consumption over cooperation. They've forgotten how to change without destroying. The integrated fleet stopped attacking and instead began projecting something the Devourers had never encountered, not submission or resistance, but invitation. The consciousness network expanded, offering connection instead of conquest. For the first time in cosmic history, Devourer ships began to slow, their ancient minds struggling to process an option that hadn't existed in their experience. Some began to shut down entirely, their programming unable to handle the paradox of offered cooperation. Others seemed to hesitate, as if something deep within their consumed consciousness was stirring. Integration successful, the collective consciousness announced. But this time the voice carried something new, not just the harmony of 17 species, but the first tentative notes of something far older and more lost. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. Some Devourer ships fled back to the void, carrying news of something impossible to their vast networks. Others remained, their ancient consciousness slowly remembering what they had forgotten in millions of years of consumption. As Earth's blue surface gleamed below the integrated fleet, Captain Reed felt his individual awareness returning while remaining connected to the greater whole. Humanity had returned not as the same species that left, but as something new, catalysts who had shown the galaxy that survival didn't require remaining unchanged, but rather embracing change while holding fast to what made each being unique. The age of separate species was ending, but the age of individual identity within collective strength was just beginning. And in the vast cosmos, other galaxies detected the impossible signal, proof that the Devourers could be not just defeated, but transformed. The human signal had returned, and with it, hope for a universe that had forgotten how to grow.